everybody, this is the Wikstrand. So 10 years ago, Man of Steel was released. It was met with very split opinions because some thought that it was, a betrayal of the Superman story. It was the most offensive thing that had been released since Al Jolson pulled his blackface in The Jazz Singer. It was a gang rape of their childhood and, other, opinions that they had. We also had, the other camp that thought that this was a modern, great update of the character. It was a fantastic, complex, dark, brooding, and very, very, very spectacular comic book movie made by the fantastic duo Christopher Nolan and Zack Snyder. I saw the movie around 2014, 2015 or something like that, and I had a very specific opinion about it. I rewatched it a couple of times over the years, and I think by now I have my final opinion about it. I have adjusted my opinion to what I think is the true meaning of this movie and what this movie truly is, good or bad. But is this movie worth watching? That's what we're gonna find out today, because today we're going to review Man of Steel. Krypton is dying, and Jor-El, played by Russell Crowe, is trying to warn the people of Krypton that the end is near and they have to do something about it. But they don't believe him; they don't want to listen to him. So in secret, he's planning an escape, not for himself or his wife, but for his son, Kal-El, which is the first child that has been conceived on natural way in Krypton for generations, for centuries actually, because up until this point every person in Krypton has been made from scratch, basically in a laboratory to suit a specific need. You need a good welder, or you need a good builder, or you need a good fighter, or you need a good general. Then you just make one. That also takes away the desires and hopes of them to achieving something else than what they have been designed to do. Now this thing I thought was very interesting, and they could have explored it more, but they didn't do it. The more I think about it, the Krypton thing is actually so good that they actually could have made an entire movie surrounding that entire thing of the downfall of Krypton and stuff like that. Now they don't do that, and that's fine. But before Jor-El's offspring, aka Kal-El, is being able to leave Krypton, General Zod attempts a coup. He's ultimately defeated by Jor-El and vows revenge on him, killing him in the process, and says that no matter how far Kal-El goes, he will find him. The catchphrase. I will find him! So Krypton is destroyed, and Kal-El arrives in Kansas and soon grows up to become Clark Kent. He doesn't know that much about his past, but the older he gets, the more he tries to figure out why he is the way he is. And his dad, played by Kevin Costner, tells him that you cannot draw attention to the fact that you can do all these amazing feats of strength and stuff like that. And he's arguing with him about shouldn't I have saved those people, etc., etc., etc. And slowly but surely, he discovers more and more about his past and the spaceship and stuff like that, and also receives the video call from Jor-El from the other side of the grave and stuff like that, telling him about his past and stuff like that. So he basically has two dads telling him how to live his life and stuff like that. And when he finally starts to discovering his purpose and meaning, and they have a visitor, General Zod, who tells the people of Earth that give up Kal-El or there will be consequences. What is going to happen now? This movie has one massive problem that it cannot quite get rid of, and that is the fact that this movie feels more like a Batman story rather than a Superman story. It feels almost like, Warner Brothers found this, synopsis for an unused Batman movie that Christopher Nolan was, writing, and says, hey, this will be great for, our new Superman movie. We just take the word Batman and we replace it with Superman. And this is a thing that this movie never could quite get over, because Superman always felt more like a negative Nancy and too dark and too brooding, when it's supposed to be, this beacon of hope and light and stuff like that. For me, Superman isn't the most interesting comic book character of all time. He's very good and he's very optimistic and he is invincible. And the only real story you can do with Superman is that the villain has to find some kryptonite, who then uses it to make Superman lose his power, and then he has to regain his power again, and then he defeats the villain. So it's difficult to find variations to the story. I thought that he actually found a story in this movie that I really liked, because you didn't quite know where this one was going. And we also have a fantastic villain in General Zod. Michael Shannon made this character so much fun. He had this aura of hate surrounding him, the fury, the venom, the vengeance. It all worked. And I actually think that he's a more complex character than his villainous character from The Shape of Water, but that's a story for another time. But how good is the movie? I think that this movie is quite good. I think that the acting is pretty good. I think Henry Cavill is very good as Superman. I think that Lawrence Fishburne is really good as Lois Lane's boss. Lois Lane, by the way, played by Amy Adams. Michael Shannon is, as I said, extremely good as General Zod, even though he cannot quite reach the lofty heights set by Terrence Stamp playing the same character in Superman 2. Kneel before Zod. Then we of course have to talk about, for a second, Kevin Costner and Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe was just Russell Crowing around as Jor-El and felt like he didn't give a shit about this one. And I was very scared that I was going to be bored as hell about Kevin Costner, playing Superman's Earth dad, but he was surprisingly good, and he has very, very good chemistry together with Henry Cavill, and the scenes with them together are actually the most heartfelt and the most genuine in the entire movie. The same thing cannot be said when it comes to the chemistry between Cavill and Amy Adams. This was non-existing. Superman and Lois Lane is probably the most famous couple in superhero history, and them not being able to work some magic surrounding them is a little bit, that could have been done better. But acting speaking, I think it is pretty good. When it comes to the action sequences, it is absolutely fantastic. We have a pretty long build-up phase in this movie where we, intercut between Superman as a kid and Superman as a man, and him doing things and stuff like that. And it worked better than I feared it would, because I thought this was going to be a long build-up of him slowly discovering his power and being a kid, and it was going to drag a lot, and Kevin Costner was going to be so incredibly boring that I would fall asleep. But I didn't, and I actually thought that it worked very good, because when General Zod comes, and when General Zod starts making his demands, and Superman says that ain't gonna happen on my watch, brother, we just have a bunch of really fantastic and awesome action sequences, especially those in Smallville, when Superman is battling General Zod and his minions. I don't know why they worked so well. Maybe it's because it was taking place during daylight, and usually when these sequences, goes on, it's usually, nighttime and inside and stuff like that. But when it was, outside in a small town, I don't know why, but it felt bigger. Even though when they, moved over to Metropolis and we had all of these with buildings collapsing and cars flying through the air and stuff like that, after a while, those sequences got a little bit stale and overstayed its welcome ever so slightly. Speaking of overstaying its welcome, this movie is very long, but it never felt long. It could have been trimmed down a little bit, especially the third act could have been trimmed down, 10-15 minutes maybe, and it probably would have been even better. But I still think that it pulled off its very lengthy runtime quite well. And then we of course have to talk about that sequence in the end that made everybody go, "Argh!" Personally, I didn't mind it that much. Maybe because I didn't grow up with Superman, and maybe I didn't, read too many comic books, and especially not anything about Superman. So that thing didn't bother me that much. Otherwise, I think this is a very good update on the Superman character. I think he still could have been a more positive and more uplifting character than he was. And I also think that he could have, maybe used the old soundtrack for Superman, aka my favorite soundtrack of all time. It is such a fantastic song. Do, 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 do. It is the best thing that John Williams has ever done. Fight me. I think that the updated costume of Superman worked really well, and I also think that some of the discussions they have on what Superman should be and what is the purpose of me and stuff like that actually worked very well. I didn't mind the Jesus allegory and all that stuff they did, even though it was very unsubtle of you, Mr. Zack Snyder. But one thing I did think in hindsight hurt this movie a lot was the fact that because a couple of years later, Batman vs. Superman came out, and then it just highlighted how similar the two characters were. They didn't have different philosophies, it just felt like the same character with different costumes on. And because he never, became this beacon of hope or anything like that, I never truly bought him as a character, and that damaged the character in the long run. So initially I thought that Man of Steel was a fantastic movie with fantastic action sequences and a great update on the character. I now more think that this was a great action film and a very good comic book movie, but ultimately didn't do the DC universe any favors. In my opinion, it is not as bad as some people say it is. I still think that it has its flaws, but it is still a really, really good movie. Not quite as good as Aquaman or Wonder Woman for comparison's sake, but apart from that, I think it's one of the better ones in the DC Universe movies. And if you haven't seen this movie, I would advise you to see it. It is a spectacular, entertaining superhero movie, a little bit too long for its own good, and a little bit too serious for its own good, but it is a good Superman movie, in my opinion. It's well made, it's entertaining, it's visually stunning. I give Man of Steel 72 points. We have a great villain. I think that Henry Cavill is very good as Superman. We have a pretty good story, a bunch of good side characters, and in the end, I think that this movie is much better than reputation suggests. So what do you think about Man of Steel? Comment below, and I'll see you next time for Well So and So Reviewing Well Such and Such. Thank you for watching. Thank you very much.